Hello, and welcome to another edition of Storytelling on Orchard Street. I'm your host, Pete Salamita. We are in the broadcast studios, or the podcast studios, I should say. That's old school broadcast, of P&T Knitwear, bookstore 180 Orchard Street. With me is the fantastic Mr. Phillip Giambri, a.k.a. the Ancient Mariner, who left home at 18 and never looked back. He's seen and done what others dream of or fear. That's how he's lived, and that's how he writes. Welcome, Phillip.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Jill. Nice to be here.
Oh, sorry. We're good. Your first words or two were cut off. That's my fault. So, your book?
Yes. Good boy, bad boy, a better man. It's a memoir.
I have one critique.
Yes.
If you can take it. Are you man enough to take critique? It's not long enough.
I was married for 42 years.
Probably got a lot of critique that way.
Thank you.
I'm like, I want to know more about the different aspects of your life. You needed to do this to be twice as long.
Well, a lot of the stories were told in my first two books and my poetry book, so I thought people might want to know who I was before I came to New York and my background. So that's
right.
Yeah, that's why a lot of the stories end right when I meet my wife.
Got it. Which is an incredible story. There's so many great stories in this book. I want to go backwards first to this, because you said in your description that you wrote of yourself, you mentioned a.k.a. the Ancient Mariner.
Right.
And this is an anthology you put out with Pink Trees Press, which is also the other books here, these two books, right? I don't know about all of them.
Yeah.
And it's a great testament to a lot of work you did. So you did features for years, right?
I curated a show reading series at Three of Cups Lounge for 5 years, and we had 4 features every month, and an open mic for $5 covered the cost of the use of the room. And over the period of 5 years, we had over 200 features. And
that's a lot.
Yeah,
that's impressive. And a lot of them are in this book.
Well, when the series ended, when the bar closed after 5 years, almost to the day, and Linda Kleinbub, who was Pink Trees Press editor, and Anthony Murphy.
She was also on my one of my early episodes. So,
right.
Yeah, she's fantastic too.
And Anthony Murphy, who was my associate producer for my show, said, we should do an anthology. And I said, you guys have no idea how much work that is.
Right.
So they did it, and it took them 2.5 years.
I think it's a treasure. First of all, it's not easy to do what you did with the read-ins and the open mics. It's hard to organize that. And what people should know is I think you did something that not everybody that does these things do, is that you went out in the city and went to other places, other open mics, to recruit some of the poets. That's pretty impressive.
What I wanted to do was avoid all of the mistakes that people who curated shows made that made me unhappy when I was a open mic reader or a feature. And I was determined to respect the people who come to the show. And it was never about me. I never read at my show.
Right.
And the show always started on time, and the people who were features were near the beginning of the show. And everyone, whoever came to the show, was videotaped, and I edited it and put titles on it and put them on YouTube. There's over 2,000 videos on YouTube from my show. It's a lot of work. Really.
You're an archivist. Archivist?
Well, I felt like I was capturing a bit of downtown history.
You did.
These are really talented people.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've seen, so I just started doing these open mics this beginning of the summer. And I've met a lot of people in the book, and it's fantastic. And it's a testament to you and your life and to all these people, to have this book.
Well, Linda and Anthony Murphy did the bulk of the work.
Right.
I designed the cover and did the layout for the book, but they did all the contacting the seniors, the people, and asking them to submit 3 poems, and then picking the poem that they wanted in the book, and then gathering all of the stuff together and alphabetizing them and getting bios and everybody. That's a tremendous amount of work.
Sure.
Yeah.
And by the way, Linda's a great person to have on your side. She's a hard worker. She does great events herself, and works
I'll tell you a little story about that. My first book was called Confessions of a Repeat Offender. It was basically a collection of stories about my life that I had been telling in bars and open mics and readings for 10 years or more. And people kept saying, you should write that down, those stories are interesting. So I finally did, and I had never published a book before, so I paid a friend of mine who writes mystery novels to edit it for me, and I wasn't happy with what he did, and then 2 other people edited it, and what had happened, I had deliberately included, because I'm cynical, I don't trust editors, I had deliberately included pieces that I felt weren't my best material, and I put them in the book, hoping that a good editor would say, we don't want that in the book. It doesn't belong there.
Sure.
And I went through 4 different editors, and none of them said a word. They corrected punctuation and apostrophes and, sentence structure. And then somebody suggested Linda. They said, Linda's, she's got a master's degree in creative writing. Why don't you get her to look at it? So she had been coming to my show. I asked her to look at it, and the first thing she did was said, I think maybe you should take a few of these stories out.
Wow, that's awesome. That was a great test.
And they were exactly the pieces that I put in.
Oh, that's incredible. Then you knew right there.
That was my editor.
Right. And you've developed a great working relationship with her.
Yeah, we've been partnering. When I retired from curating my show, Linda was looking for something to do, and I was going to readings at a place called Black and White Bar, Fahrenheit open mic, and they had been going for 22 years.
That's a long
and
time.
And they kept turning over hosts because they would get married, they would leave, they move, they have kids. And the manager of the bar, Richard, who I've known for years, who's also a writer, said, why don't you take the show over? I said, I can't. I'm tired from doing this. So I asked Linda, I said, you think you would want to take this over? She said, I can't do it by myself. So she drafted Jennifer Junot.
Right.
And the 2 of them started Fahrenheit Open Mic over there. And we drafted a lot of the people from my show, were the first people we invited. Right. And the people that Linda had been meeting along the way. And it was very successful. Right. So then she said, this is good. Why don't we do park shows in the summertime? So we did that. And then the pandemic hit, and she was doing Zooms, which I don't like Zooms.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about it either.
So
I like the audience feel.
Linda did Zooms and built up a large audience doing Zooms.
Wow.
So
she's difficult to do. Yeah.
So she picked up and ran with the ball long after I should have been doing it too.
So we're going to get to your book. That'll be the main focus of the interview, and there's a lot to talk about in there. But is there anything else you want to talk about the other books that you have here?
Like I said, the Confessions of a Repeat Offender is a collection of stories that I told for years in bars and joints, and then that was followed by
hold it up to the camera. There we go. Yep. Perfect. All right.
All the books are available on Amazon. So the next adventure was The Amorous Adventures of Blondie and Boho, 2 East Village dive bar coyotes. And that originated at a place called Bar 82 on 2nd Avenue, which we used to do shows in the back room and stuff. It was all neighborhood people, very creative people. And when the bar closed, everyone in the neighborhood who had been going there daily for every kind of show you could imagine, we were heartbroken. And I started thinking about 52 years living on St. Mark's Place, and I said, I think our history is going to be forgotten here. I need to tell the story of what happened in this neighborhood since I moved here.
And that's a long time to be in one place and to be in the East Village.
I've lived on the same street for 52 years, St. Mark's Place.
Crazy.
So basically, the characters of Blondie and Boho represent all of the people, the artists, the writers, the crazy people, the mishaps that I've run into. And Blondie's story starts so I could tell the story of where the Lower East Side came before I came there, which was a Polish-Ukrainian neighborhood primarily. Mm-hmm. And so I created a fictional story for Blondie of hanging out at a bar, which was a Polish bar that I was a regular at years ago. So the stories, the way I described the bar and everything, all the stories are accurately based on truthful information but fictionalized. Right. So it covers 50 years through punk rock, through hippie times, through everybody that came on St. Mark's Place at one time or another comes back 20 years later.
Kind of describe what St. Mark's Place is like for people who don't know New York City, and how much has it changed?
I call it the Boulevard of Broken Dreams.
That's great. Right. It kind of is, right?
My neighbor, Ada Calhoun, who I've known since before she was born. Her parents were a friend of mine, has lived on St. Mark's Place, and she published a book several years ago called St. Mark's is Dead. And it covered the history of our street from when the Indians were there up into the present. And the thing that everybody says about St. Mark's Place is if you went there when you were in college and you hung out and got drunk or did drugs or had sex or whatever you did, 30 years later when you're living up in Westchester and you come back down and with your wife for a night out and you're 30 pounds heavier than you were in college, and you're looking around and you say, who are these people? This place, St. Mark's is dead now, man. It used to be so. Everybody says that.
Right.
And that's the whole point of it. The generations that come change it, but it's always good.
Right.
I love it.
Okay, cool. God, I can imagine all the things you've seen over your lifetime. And there's, and then you have the book that you wrote during the pandemic.
This is called Poems from an Unending Pandemic. I was basically, through most of my life, a storyteller. And when the pandemic hit, I was trapped in my house like everyone else, and the city shut down, and I had no stories to tell anymore. There was nowhere to go and no place to talk to, no one to talk about. And my muse started visiting me at 5 o'clock in the morning and dictating things to me that seemed like poems, which I had never written before. And I started writing them down and posting them on Facebook, and I started getting positive responses. And after a year, I said, boy, I have a lot of poems here. Maybe I should make a book.
Right.
And I put them in a book, and it was so depressing. and since
it was a depressing time, let's be real.
Since I never really wrote poetry, Linda Kleinbub is a real poet. She knows form and style and how to put words together. I never did. I just wrote these things down because the muse dictated them.
Right.
So I kind of put it on a shelf for a year. And then I submitted one of the poems, or several of the poems, to the Nassau County Poet Laureate Society poetry contest last year.
Right.
And I got honorable mention.
Awesome.
And then this year I supported it. I submitted another poem, and I won the contest, actually.
That's great.
Rookie poet.
Wow, awesome.
So I said, Linda Kleinbub, maybe we should, hustle this book a little bit.
Right.
It might not be as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to talk about generated from this book, but you want to read something?
What I thought I'd do is I'd read a little piece from each of the books, starting with that.
That'd be great.
Would that
Awesome.
be all right?
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
This first piece is from Confessions of a Repeat Offender. It's called A Hard Rain on First Avenue After Midnight. A broke-down old drunk man stumbling down First Avenue in the rain, trying hard not to slide away, held up mostly by his cane. With his good arm, he's supporting a girl with a swelled-up foot that hurts. Slow steps moving forward and jerking and staggering back in spurts. She's hanging on tight, teeth clenched, fighting to hold back screams of pain. She hoists a broke umbrella, struggling for cover from the rain. Two poor lost souls, knowing they can't do it on their own, stumbling down First Avenue together, trying hard to find a way back home. Just a broke-down old drunk man and a pretty young thing in pain, wandering through purgatory in this godforsaken rain.
Great.
That's the only thing I ever wrote that rhymes. I don't know why. I didn't plan it that way.
Is it necessary? I mean, I don't think it's necessary. Like my style of writing, and maybe it's similar to yours in some ways. I just view what I do as story poems. They're just slices of life.
Exactly. Exactly. That's why I identify with you immediately when I.
Right. Yeah.
Should I read another?
Yeah.
Okay. This is from The Amorous Adventures of Blondie and Boho, and it's called Smoke and Mirrors. This is when Blondie and Boho are first starting their relationship, and everybody's kind of dancing to figure out if the other person really cares about them, likes them. Nobody wants to make the big move to say, I love you or something like that. And nobody wants to be the first one. So it's called Smoke and Mirrors. They're not real. They seem to exist for each other only as smoke and mirrors. Hard to grasp, hard to hold on to, hard to see clearly, hard to fathom if the other's really there. Blind lovers reach through smoke, grope for substance, for honest, for real, for something to cling to. Truth is smoke, remains elusive, unknown, slips through fingers. Mirror reflects back a lone image, even as they struggle to be two. To hold tight, not slip away, not let go, vanish from the other. Smoke and mirrors hold no substance, yet they lie together on a bed of dreams, hoping against hope that mirrors can be windows, that fresh air dissolves smoke, will reveal two lovers embracing. For a moment, happiness seems real. For this moment, they're not smoke and mirrors.
All right. Cool. I love it.
Should I keep going? Or you want
What's the next one from?
This is the poem that won this year's Nassau County Poet Laureate contest.
Okay, cool. So read that, and then we'll talk about the book, and then you'll read something from the book.
This is called Freedom. A carriage horse escapes, runs free on 11th Avenue, heads downtown trotting elegantly, effortlessly dodging traffic, head held high, prancing, seemingly savoring the free moment. At 22nd Street, he's recaptured, returned to the stable, restrained, locked down. My chest tightens. He's me. He is us. He lived for just a moment the freedom that was our dream, that free spirit buried deep inside, yearning to break out and run away. I'm hurt, disappointed, and sad. Life captured me, captured all of us, I guess, puts us in bridles and blinders, trains us to follow, not lead. This suit, this tie, this fake smile, the worried agreement, the false submission, the sellout signature we put on email, the acquiescence we've allowed, the voice of protest we swallowed the moment we sold out. He's safely stable again, tethered, readjusted, stall secured. Will he remember that moment of freedom? Will it comfort him? Or has he finally been broken too?
That's awesome. I can see why that won an award. What led to that? Or
during the pandemic, I was watching Channel 1 News, and a carriage horse was running down 8th Avenue.
Right.
He actually escaped it. And I saw it. It was just like, he seemed so thrilled and excited and happy. And he was proud. He was marching down the street. It was beautiful. And then all of a sudden, at 23rd Street, they got him.
Oh, okay.
It hurt.
That's some story. So you do that too, because I get my stories from different places.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could be from a documentary I'm watching, or from like a news story, or Do you find yourself like moving around? You come up with an idea, and
I actually am very lazy. I just sit around and wait for the muse. She wakes me up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and the story's already there. And I'm the stenographer. I type it out, and then I stare.
On an actual typewriter?
No.
Oh, okay.
on my computer.
Okay.
And I stare at it for a couple of days, and I say, wow, I wrote that, huh?
Right.
And then I look at it, and eventually, after a couple of weeks, I'll start editing it when I can look at it objectively.
Right.
And that's pretty much, I can't go to writing classes. I've never had any writing training. I can't write on demand. If I go to a class and they say, here's a theme, write something, I can't do that.
I don't know if I could either. And, I'm not sure. It's funny because I was talking to Jill about that. Jill's in the studio with us. It's my wife. She's helping to make sure I don't mess up the technology. But I was talking about that because I went to, I'm not going to mention what it was, but I went to an open mic in a different venue than I've been going. I'm trying to get out and be in front of or with different people. And I was wondering if it was my place because it was not rigid, but it was a place where they have classes. And I was thinking, do I want to take a class? I have my style, and I write for myself in a lot of ways.
Exactly. I understand that.
Yeah.
When I was first starting out with open mics, writers basically, I think, are shy people. They're not performers by birth. And when I started going to open mics, I deliberately chose places where academics went, where I knew they didn't like my work or they wouldn't understand my work, so that I could overcome stage fright. I figure if I could read in front of these people, I could do it anywhere.
Well, that's curious. That's something.
That's how I started. Juju Mukto Tea Lounge.
Okay. And did they get you at some point?
Only one person, George Wallace. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a pretty well-known author and poet. George Wallace came up to me the first time I went there, and he said, I like what you're writing. He said, please come back again.
Cool.
And then about 4 months after that, he published that piece about hard rain on First Avenue in Walt Whitman newspaper that he puts out.
All right, cool.
Yeah, and I'm still friends with George.
Right.
I just wrote a blurb for his new book.
Okay, awesome. So let's get to your book, Good Boy, Bad Boy, A Better Man, A Cautionary Tale. So you grew up in South Philly. You were born, was it 41 or?
Yep. August of 41.
Right.
Yeah. So
It seems like at least aspects of that, your childhood were really vivid, or the surroundings and what it looked like, and living there in South Philly. And
I didn't know that I remembered all that stuff until, like I said, the muse comes at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
I had intended to write another poetry book, and
Right.
these stories started coming out, and I remember being 2 years old in a high chair with my grandfather, and like, wow, where did that come? I had no memory
Right.
of that at all.
Right.
And then I verified that with my sister. She said, yeah, he used to come over and feed us at lunchtime
Wow.
when Mom was working.
Right.
And then the stories just started rolling out, and I asked Linda Kleinbaum, I said, would you be willing to publish this stuff? It's like not what I normally do or not what you do. And she says, well, it's kind of nostalgic, and it's historic for people who aren't your age. And, you grew up when there were horse wagons for coal, for milk deliveries, for everything. So, yeah, so I'd give it a shot.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot in your, especially your early history that, people today might not be able to identify with, but make for great stories. One of them is, talk about, obviously you had vivid memories of your experience with polio.
Yeah. The thing I remember the most about polio was the pain of the shot they gave me in my spine. A spinal tap is a terrible, terrible thing for a 4-year-old kid. But I was at my grandmother's house in Jersey, where I spent every summer because my parents worked, and she was like our summer camp at her house. And it was very rural, and we used to stay outside and play in my grandmother's wash tub and play under the hose in the summertime like, typical kids do. And one morning I woke up and I fell down when I got out of bed. And I thought my leg was asleep, so I started slapping it and trying to wake it up. And I stood up again and fell down again, and I was in a hospital. And
were you terrified, or what did you make?
Oh yeah,
I
I started crying. Yeah. But at the same time, every summer there were epidemics of polio, so they knew pretty much quickly what it was.
Okay.
Because all the kids were getting
Did
it.
your family have an idea that's what it was before they took you to the hospital, or they just took you to the hospital and that's
that
when
I don't remember.
Right,
After falling down, the next thing I remember is being in that dark room and getting a spinal tap.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then I remember being in the polio ward. They put us in quarantine for 3 months.
So you were separated from your family for 3 months.
Yeah.
And you were how old?
4 years old.
My God, that's terrifying. I can't imagine.
It was pretty pitiful, yeah.
At that age, especially 4 years old.
I cried a lot, and I sat by the window and watched my mother sometimes, a couple times a week. She would leave work in Philadelphia. She would get on a trolley car, go to Midtown Philadelphia, and then take a trolley car over to Camden, New Jersey, and then walk to the hospital to visit me. And she did that several times a week. And when she would leave, I would be heartbroken.
Right.
I always wanted to go.
That had to stay with you, right? Like that to this day?
Yeah, that was very traumatic for me. And I don't know, maybe it's part of me feeling like an outsider most of my life. There are a whole bunch of things that contributed to me never feeling like I belonged where I was at any time.
Mm-hmm.
I always felt like the odd man out. And maybe that's helped me as a writer because I observe things better than...
But you say that, and I've only known you for a short spell, but it seems like everybody's your friend. So I don't know. You think of that about yourself. Seriously, it seems like you have a lot of friends. Like, at your book release event, there was a lot of people there.
Yeah, we had a good crowd. Well, I think finally at 81 years old that I've let go of all the youthful anger I had when I was in my late 30s, and I started living my own life again. And I think I let go of all of the things that were stopping me from being the person I wanted to be. And I think that's when people started recognizing.
What was the secret? What's the secret of doing that?
The secret to doing that was that I realized that
I need to write this down.
I was spending my life angry at my father and authority figures, and thinking that I'm being a rebel, which is what all the kids in the 50s thought they were rebels, rebelling against authority, Catholic school, and military. And basically what I was doing, I was living my life against something rather than living my own life.
Right.
I thought that rebelling was like the good thing to do, but it prevented me from being me, really.
Right.
And when I realized that in my mid-30s somewhere along the line, I said, wow, it's like a light bulb went off. I shouldn't be doing that. This is my life, my turn now. And that's within a year or two, I met my wife. We got married, and my whole life changed when that realization happened.
I loved your first date. You went to see Reefer Madness.
Midnight show.
You were set up. It was a blind date.
Yes.
Reefer Madness.
The St. Mark's.
Midnight. Yeah, that's classic.
And everyone used to bring food in there, so it would be smell of chicken, popcorn, and you'd smoke a couple doobies while you're there.
I don't think people today would understand. Like, that's an old, what is that, from the 40s?
Yeah.
And it's marijuana movie, but it's really funny. But I think it'd be even funnier now, because now pot's become fairly accepted in a lot of, I'm sure there's parts of the country where it's not, but, pretty soon it's going to be legal to buy it in stores in New York City.
It was a film made by the government that was so out of truth.
It's so funny.
It became a hilarious movie because they were depicting people as being crazy maniacs from smoking a marijuana joint.
Right, yeah.
So it was a very popular movie in the 60s.
Right. Yeah, well, I remember seeing it too. That's just, when I saw that was your first date, I was like, holy cow. So I wrote a few things down I wanted to ask you about. I already asked you about the polio. So you wanted to be a cowboy.
Yes, I always wanted to be a cowboy.
Right. And it's obviously the imagery is right there on the cover of your book.
Well, in my heart, I'm still a cowboy.
Right.
So,
well, I mean, in the 50s, it was such a big deal, like cowboy movies and
basically,
the culture.
During that time, the Eisenhower era, there was good people and bad people. The communists were bad, the Americans were good. We won World War II, we saved the world. And all the cowboys in cowboy movies always wore white uniforms, and the bad guys wore black uniforms.
Right.
And you're always instructed in every movie. There was a script about how you were supposed to behave as a person, to be a good person.
Right.
And I, like a lot of other kids, I guess, were kind of brainwashed into that code of ethics, those values that are all good, basically.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But we were, repeating and repeating and repeating, and all the books I read all had that same cowboy mentality of, being an honorable person, and there's a whole code of cowboy ethics. And when that came in collision with what I was expected to do in Catholic school, I chose the cowboy way rather than the Catholic school way, which is when I gave up religion.
But the cowboy that wore the black.
Well, Hopalong Cassidy wore black, but he was a good guy.
Right. I remember Hopalong Cassidy. Talk about a little bit about so you were a hall monitor. I love that image of being a hall monitor. Talk about that.
Well, we had the safety patrol in elementary school. Public schools had the Keystone Safety Patrol, where you wear a belt that was like military-looking white canvas belt with a big badge over your chest. And in Catholic schools, they had American Automobile Association provided just badges that looked like police badges that you wore. And basically, as a safety patrol person, you were supposed to stand at corners as a crossing guard, but the people are hired and paid to do that. Now, we were doing it for nothing. And then you were hall monitors, make sure kids got to their classes on time. And, always looking for attention and approval. I thought I was like a big deal. I'm a safety patrol. I got promoted to lieutenant, and then I got promoted to captain. I thought I was really hot stuff, And when I went to Catholic school, they made me a lieutenant because of my prior experience.
So the military thing, the cowboy thing, and then you wound up in the Navy.
Yeah. Well, sadly, I didn't choose the Navy out of patriotism.
Right.
I grew up near the Philadelphia Navy Yard, very close to it. All the streets in our neighborhood were named after naval heroes. And I always saw sailors with those really cool-looking 13-button uniforms and had the hats slapped on the back of their heads, and they always had a pretty girl on their arm. And I said, honestly, I'm going to wear that uniform and I'm going to get laid.
Well, a lot of what people do, and men especially in their life, is based on that, including being in a rock band, which I did.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in the late 50s, we said you joined the Navy, and this was at the beginning of the Cold War,
right?
In the early days. But then you wound up on the USS Independence.
Right.
Right.
That was the first ship I was on.
Oh, okay, yeah, and then you went to Palermo Submarine School, and you went in 2 years. You went from fireman apprentice to petty officer, second class sonar man. You were patrolling the waters off of Russia during. At that point, now it's really deep into the Cold War, right? What was that? What was that like?
It was very scary, actually, because we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, in which we were on high alert. We actually had, atomic warheads on our missiles, and we had targets. Each submarine, there was 5 of us out there, rotating shifts, and our missiles at that time only had 1,100-mile range, and our targets some of them were pretty deep inside Russia. So, in some patrols, we were practically sitting on the beach.
You had to get really close
in order to make your targets. We were always operating in the middle of the Russian fishing fleet, which was a fake fishing fleet because about a third of the boats had torpedo tubes on them.
Oh, nice.
Torpedoes.
Was it terrifying to some degree?
No, I thought it was exciting.
When
you're 19 years old and you're,
So you weren't really thinking about
no, not at all.
What could go wrong?
And honestly, when they were saying that, Russia's bringing missiles over to Cuba and they're talking about bombing Florida, my head was, well, let's nuke those bastards before they get us,
Because I was just about to ask you before you said that, you're on a ship and you're doing your job. I was wondering how much of, the outside noise of the Cold War made it to you.
We had a daily newspaper that was supposedly news of what was going on in the world. Because once a day, they would put up an antenna. It's called a floating antenna. The submarine would have to come up to periscope depth in the North Atlantic in the wintertime, which is an adventure, 50-foot waves. And then they would receive radio signals with news and messages and new order changes or whatever. And the radioman would type up a newspaper every day. And some of us, including me and my good friend Don Ulmer, would write stories for the newspaper every day. I was writing fiction stories for the newspaper.
Right.
But the radioman had a knack for distorting baseball, football, and sports scores to suit the teams that they liked, so that they always came out winners. And then just for fun, they would print stories like when John Glenn went off into space, they said that he never came back, and that the last words were, "There's no toilet paper."
Wow!
That was one. And then another story they told us was that Joe DiMaggio killed Marilyn Monroe with a Louisville Slugger bat.
Whoa!
And we believed these things because we had, we had no way of knowing.
Sure. How could you?
So the radio men always made fun with us with stuff like that.
So high school you had the acting bug, and also
high school I was
writing. You started writing. When did you start with acting?
Well, when I was in the Navy, I was drinking a lot. I had started drinking when I was 14 years old. And the weapons officer on our ship and I became friends because we both wrote for the ship's newspaper, and we stood watches together and used to discuss writers that we liked. I favored 50s beat era writers, and he favored 40 Hemingway and the 40s writers. Sure. So we were always arguing and discussing that. And then on my last patrol, he said, "Do you ever think about doing anything other than being drunk when you're not working?" And I said, I haven't really given it a lot of thought.
Right.
So he said, my wife runs the theater on the sub base there, and they're always looking for people to do extras and help out down there. He said, would you be any interested in doing that? So I said, actors and stuff? He said, yeah. I said, yeah, I'll do that, yes. And I went down there. He told his wife I was coming down, and she interviewed me, and the first thing she said was, you smell like you've been drinking and you act like you've been drinking, so don't come back unless you're not drinking. So that was a wake-up call. No one had ever said that to me before. In the Navy, if you were expected, if you were out drinking all night, as long as you did your job, nobody cared.
But didn't they have rum rations?
No, that's a British Navy.
Oh, okay.
British Navy.
But I thought there was something that you had mentioned.
Well, I was a sonarman, so sonarmen were allotted 1 gallon every patrol of 150 proofs alcohol to clean our equipment.
Oh.
So out of that, the equipment never got cleaned with the alcohol. We would allocate a half a gallon for our use during the patrol, and the other half a gallon we would barter with other people in other departments, either for porn magazines or for canned crab meat or canned lobster meat or delicacies that we, were in demand. So that's what we did with that. And our cooks used to have a still under the deep fat fryers. They used to they fermented dried vegetables and fruits that we used to have.
Wow, okay.
And there was always a couple chiefs on the boat who had a bottle of something that would come out every now and then.
So this is Storytelling on Orchard Street, and you're a great storyteller. We've already blown through pretty much the whole show. Do you want to read one more thing from the new book?
All right.
Before we hit the road?
New book. Oh. I don't actually have anything from the new book. I'll read something. All right. Anything, you have a favorite you'd like to hear?
Well.
How long do I have? I got 4 minutes?
We should wrap up with a few minutes.
The Dance
Pick a short one.
The Dance King.
Right.
I'm 15. I get a job setting pins at Stony Creek Bowling Alley. I work lead nights, and Saturdays I get 11 cents a game, 22 cents when I set doubles. I ride to work on the back of my friend Donnie's 48 Harley. On paydays, we chip in and get a couple bucks to an old wino who works with us, and he buys us wine. He gets a gallon for himself and a gallon of apple wine for us. We get drunk before every dance we go to on Friday nights. I'm a really good fast dancer, what we used to call jitterbugging. I enter dance contests all over Delaware County, and I never lose. When you go to a dance contest outside your own neighborhood and you win the contest, you generally get beat up by the locals for winning, unless you bring along protection. I always bring guys along from my neighborhood. I fill them up with apple wine. While everyone's standing in a circle watching the dance contest, my guys go through the girls' purses left on the metal folding chairs along the wall, and they take their money. That's their vig for covering my ass. That's what life was like for bad boys then.
You know the movie Wedding Crashers?
Yeah.
They got the idea from you.
Oh, yeah.
There's a section in the book about you and your friends crashing weddings.
2 seasons in a row, yeah. 56 and 57, we were crashing weddings.
And somehow you managed to never get caught?
No.
That's awesome.
We were smooth.
I'm going to read one of yours.
Okay, good.
I had the distinct pleasure to be able to read on stage during your book release event. And this is one of the ones I chose, one of the 3, and I really like this one. It's called Colored Easter Chicks. Mom buys us 4 dyed Easter chicks at Woolworths. Baby blue, pink, deep purple, and canary yellow. We house them in a small cardboard box in the kitchen with sawdust on the bottom and a light clipped to the box to keep them warm in our cold kitchen. We love these chicks. We feed them and care for them until they grow so large they have to put them in a big empty Scott's toilet paper box, which stands about 3 feet high and 3 feet square. The chicks are rapidly becoming chickens and are healthy and loud. One morning, we come down for breakfast to find that rats have chewed holes in the box, killed the chickens, dismembered them, and eaten pieces of them. There are body parts, blood, and feathers strewn across the kitchen. My sister Doris and I are hysterical. It's going to take years to overcome that trauma. And I think you told me that you really never fully overcame that.
Well, there's 2 or 3 other rat stories in the book.
I've noticed that.
And one of the things I was told by Madeline Ortenberg, who's an extraordinary editor, she edited the book, and she said, those rat stories are creepy. Do you have to use all of them in there? Can't you just take a few out? And I said, that was my life then. Everybody that I grew up with, rats were part of our life.
Sure.
And, they were, like you have a cat and dog, we had rats.
Well, it's New York City. There's plenty of rats probably flitting around somewhere out there, too.
Yeah, to ignore the rats in my life would have been impossible.
Right. Any final thoughts? I mean, this went really quick. I'm probably going to have you on again.
Well, thanks for having me, Pete.
You're the best, man. You're a great storyteller, an easy guy to get to know, and a fun guy to be around.
I'm at a stage of my life where fun and romance are my objects. I don't have any pressure on myself. I don't want to change the world. I'm not going to get rich, so I'm just out to travel a little bit, have a good time, and try and keep happy.
I get the sense that you're achieving all that too. You seem to be really making the most of life.
These are some of the happiest days of my life.
Awesome, man. It's good for you.
Yeah. So
this has been Storytelling on Orchard Street. My guest, Phillip Giambri. Thank you, Phillip. Appreciate it. Check out his books. They're on Amazon. and they're fantastic. Thank you, Philip, again, and thank you all for listening, and bye-bye.